Good morning everybody, welcome to Indycar on Friday the 24th of August. I'm Gordon Ross, and in today's news you will probably have seen the lurid headlines on the Daily Record that former First Minister Alex Salmond is being accused of sexual assault during his time in office at Bute House between 2013 and 2014. The person who has brought the action against him is an English-born civil servant attached to the Scottish Government. And this particular lady, this civil servant, has actually specifically created the legislation necessary for her to bring these accusations, or to bring this case to court against Mr Salmond. Now remember that the alleged offences happened somewhere in the region of 5 or 6 years ago, and nothing was said at the time. There were no allegations made against him at the time. This appears, at first glance at least, to be a smear campaign being orchestrated by yet another UK sleeper, another person planted inside the Scottish Parliament with the view of using whatever powers have been gained during her term in office there to make a smear campaign about Alex Salmond appear at just the most convenient moment for the British government, which, as we know, is right at the point just now when they are mired in a series of pointless so-called negotiations with the European Union that they have no hope of actually winning. So while Mr Salmond is having to defend himself against this allegation, or these allegations, it's also clear that his defence team, his actual counsel, have not been allowed access to any evidence, any witnesses, to any information whatsoever about who has made the allegations, or about what they were, when they happened, or anything about them. He has no idea who's making the allegations and is having to defend himself and to try to clear his reputation on the basis of a smear campaign orchestrated by both the Daily Record, it appears, and this, I think this particular woman in the Scottish Parliament, who is a permanent secretary to the Scottish Government. A permanent secretary is supposed to be a non-partisan, non-political, permanent civil servant, a person who has a job for life, running areas of government on behalf of the politicians who don't have always, politicians change with governments, but the permanent secretary like this has immense amounts of power in the civil service. And this particular woman, who has originally came from England, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. She's educated at Liverpool and has been in her position for a number of years. But why has she chosen now to launch this attack on Alex Salmond, the ex-leader of the SNP? It doesn't seem to make much sense politically, other than the fact that it obscures what's going on with Brexit and diverts people's attention away from the actual realities of political life in Britain at the moment, and onto a sideshow which has only allegations, no evidence being brought, and no chance for Alex Salmond's counsel to look into the matter and actually to come up with any kind of defence. When you're accused of something and you don't know who's accusing you, you don't know what the charges are, you don't know when it supposedly happened or what was supposed to have happened, you can't defend yourself. And this particular civil servant has invented the laws necessary to bring this case against the former First Minister. And it's clear now that Alex Salmond is reluctantly having to sue the Scottish Government, but only indirectly. He's actually having to sue the Scottish Civil Service, not the Scottish Government, but the Scottish Civil Service, to find out what the hell is going on, who's making the allegations against him, and to get the right through the High Court in Edinburgh to actually see the evidence against him and find out what on earth it is he's supposed to be accused of. A very one-sided smear campaign, by the sound of it, very carefully orchestrated by somebody who's obviously been planted in the Scottish Civil Service with a view to undermining the credibility of the SNP government at an opportune moment for the British state. Now this is my opinion, obviously, and I put together the pieces, as you know, and I come up with what I think is the most likely scenario. A conspiracy theorist I am not usually, but in this case I think it's very obvious to virtually everybody that Salmond, who's well known around Scotland for his huge generosity and public spiritedness, and the fact that he gives tens of thousands of pounds of his own salaries to charity every single year, never gets any publicity whatsoever, and suddenly he's attacked in this way by a top civil servant who has come up from England and is sitting in a permanent secretarial position in the Scottish Government. It's a bit fishy, I think you'll agree. On the other hand, I hear today in a separate news item that Sergei Skripal, the man who was allegedly poisoned by Novichok in Salisbury, seems to have disappeared completely. His family in Russia actually fear that he's now dead because he was supposed to have actually rung his own mother on her birthday, and his daughter Yulia said that Sergei was going to call his mother 3 days before her birthday. He never phoned, and he hasn't contacted the family for over a month. The Russian family of the Skripals now believe that Sergei is either being held somewhere in a safe location by the British Secret Service, or he's actually dead, and we will never hear from him again. The British Dirty Tricks Department is extremely talented and extremely clever at what they do, and the Russians, the Skripals in Russia themselves, were deeply suspicious that they were never allowed to visit their relative. They never saw any photographs of them in the hospital ward, and yet, as they pointed out, when Alexander Litvinenko was poisoned in London several years before, his picture was all over the papers in a hospital bed. He was interviewed extensively by the media in the hospital, and yet the Skripals have vanished off the face of the earth and are not being allowed to talk to anybody. Very, very suspicious. The British government, as I said, very good at this kind of thing, and they're excellent at mounting smear campaigns on political opponents. Salmond's case is an attempt to discredit him personally, but it's also a broader smear to try and undermine both the credibility and the integrity of the Scottish National Party in general, and to chip away at the popularity of Nicola Sturgeon as a leader. It's very difficult for smear campaigners to attack female leaders. It's much more believable in the public eye for a man to have attacked 2 women than it would be for a female politician to have somehow assaulted 2 men. And so most of these smear campaigns are orchestrated against men. In America, you probably remember that Trump was accused of having affairs with women, having groped women. And in America, Trump's method for dealing with that was to buy them off with bribes. And yet he's still the President of the United States, even though he's been bribing people and giving them hush money to keep their stories out of the news. You will notice that Salmond has not done anything like that. In fact, he's very reluctantly having to take the Scottish Government to court in the High Court in Edinburgh to find out what the hell is going on and why he is being targeted in this way and who it is who's actually made the allegations. He is entitled to know who has made the allegations against him, but their identities can't be made public to you and I, and that is understandable to protect any victim or potential victim in any alleged crime. That would be normal, but he doesn't even know who it was who made the allegations. He only knows that they were made about some alleged assaults, 2 of them apparently, at Butte House before the first referendum. Now, it puzzles me as to why they've waited until now, 5 years later, to finally try and drag his name through the mud in the Daily Record. The Daily Record, as we know, is very much a unionist-oriented paper which runs constant SNP bad stories all over its front pages. It is very much tuned in to Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party still to this day, and always prints bad stories about the SNP, and very rarely, if at all, ever attacks any of the UK parties in the same way. So, like I say, it's the usual thing. British media, British sleeper, British spin doctors and smear campaigners doing their usual thing of trying to smear somebody in high office in Scotland. It's pathetic, really. It's transparently obvious as well to everyone in Scotland that this is a smear campaign. Unfortunately, they can't do it to Nicola Sturgeon because she is so good as a politician, and she is a clean-living human being who doesn't have the kind of nasty, corrupt, underhanded nature of some of the most vile politicians in the Tory party, many of whom have had to resign, you'll remember, over allegations of bullying, sexual assaults, other perversions of other kinds. I can't remember just exactly how many Tory MPs and Tory ministers have had to resign in recent years because of allegations which were true. They haven't been trumped up as smear campaigns, were actually true. They admitted to them and disappeared off the front benches to the back bench, but never end up in court, never end up in jail. And yet Salmond's name is dragged through the mud. He's not even a politician anymore. He is running a television show for a Russian channel which the BBC hates, which the British establishment hates. I can't think of a man who's done more for Scotland than Salmond has, and yet he's the target. Anyway, I think I've said enough. We get the picture. Another smear campaign. Let's concentrate on what the British state is trying to deflect your attention from today. What's going on with Brexit, and what other nasty surprises is the British state secretly preparing at the moment that we're trying to deflect your attention from with this story in the Daily Record. So have a look at other sources of media today. Look at Al Jazeera, look at RT, look at RTE from Ireland, and look at newspapers from France, Germany, and anywhere else that you can find, but not the British press, because the British press are going to go for Alex Salmond like a pack of dogs now. That's what this is all about. Whoever this woman is, I know her name because I researched her a little bit this morning to find out who she was, and I know that she has a degree from Liverpool University, and I know that she's been in her position for a number of years. And I also know that she created the law which has allowed Salmond to be accused of this without being able to either find out who his accusers were, or anything about the case, or to interview witnesses, or even Salmond's not been allowed to talk to civil servants who contacted him to say that they would testify in his defence that these were lies and smears and that they never happened. He's not being allowed to call them as witnesses. He's not being allowed to do any of those things. This woman has stitched him up like a kipper. And I expect the Daily Record to have this all over their pages for the next few days. And I guarantee you that at the end of the process with Salmond suing them, these charges will quietly disappear and the story will vanish from sight. It will have done its job of damaging the confidence of the Scottish people in the Scottish Government and its integrity and its moral compass. But that's the whole idea, remember. It's to destroy your confidence in the Scottish Government. And this woman has obviously been paid by the British state to create this. She's done a very good job of it, I have to say. As smear campaigns go, this one is unique, because the actual legislation for the smear campaign has been specially designed by this individual to do this exact thing. So he's actually created the law that allows her to smear Salmond in the first place. And I think that has got to be unique in smear campaigning. Even in the UK, that's the most underhanded thing that I've ever heard of. Anyway, got to go. Have a good weekend. Let's get behind Alex Salmond and let's keep a close eye on the rest of the media, not the British media. Let's look for what they're trying to hide from us today. Something else will be happening somewhere in Europe that we're not being told about. Incidentally, just a matter of interest, Russia Today is the only television news agency which has covered all of Dominic Raab's speeches from beginning to end without edits. None of the British press has done that. They've cut and pasted bits and pieces of Raab's speech together as though that was its entirety. But Russia Today is the only one which has the entire press conference with Raab and with Barnier all in one piece, from beginning to end, without cuts and without edits. Have a look at it, because you'll see a lot more detail in there than you would see on the BBC. Okay, I'll see you later. Bye for now. Have a great weekend.